What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. And I'm back. Did you miss me? Yeah, I don't even need to ask that, right? Of course you missed me. Of course you missed these great reviews of The Walking Dead. But yeah, man, it's time. The Walking Dead is back, and this is what we've all been waiting for. We've been waiting to see the aftermath of the final resolution of the Sophia subplot, and we've been waiting to see what Herschel's reaction would be. So, let me just say right now that this series is getting incredibly depressing. I mean, if you thought it was dark before, you haven't seen anything yet. I mean, it's getting real ugly. I mean, shit, they were already in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. But man, I mean, wow. Wow. And of course the writing continues to be excellent, so there's no problems there. It's just, it's gotten even darker. So let me just jump right into this to show you guys how it's getting real ugly for Rick and the gang. Alright, so like always, I'll break this down into two parts. First is the summary, second is the second part is the analysis. So let's see. This episode is, obviously about the aftermath of Shane's actions when he, rips open the barn and the walkers come out and he starts shooting everybody. And so basically in the aftermath of all of this, they collect the bodies. They bury their loved ones. They actually, hold some sort of memorial service for their loved ones. And then they burn everyone else, basically. All the other walkers, they have to burn them for obvious reasons. And the relationships, both within each individual group, that is Rick's group and Herschel's group, are really starting to be strained. And of course, the relationship between the groups are really starting to be strained. There's still this, subplot of Dale versus Shane, and that gets explored a little bit in that Dale reveals to Lori his suspicions about, Shane, insofar as he believes that Shane, probably killed Otis and sacrificed him in order for Shane to be able to get away. And it looks like even Carl is being turned cold. He tells his mother, Lori, that, he would have, shot Sophia in the head as well. And, of course, Lori's, kind of taken aback by this, a little bit frightened. And she sees, how this world is impacting, Carl. And, this raises some deeper questions about the ethics. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but this raises some deeper questions about the ethics of having a child under these circumstances. Because as we all know now, Lori's pregnant. And I think that's just a bad decision. I mean, I think it's a terrible decision to put yourself in a position where you could be pregnant, and not just be pregnant, but make the conscious decision to have a child under these type of circumstances during a zombie apocalypse. I think that's just, bad reasoning on her part and also Rick. But hey, this is their decision. Although I think it's, a deeply flawed decision. Herschel goes off on the deep end. And I'll sort of explain that in my analysis a little bit later on. But Herschel basically goes off the deep end. His world has basically been shattered. His wife, and I believe that was his son, who was also a walker, or maybe it was his daughter. But basically his world is shattered. And Daryl is really hurt by this, because you remember, Daryl almost died searching for Sophia. And, he was out there every day searching for her. And for it to come to this, where now, and the show is just really raw, because, they actually show Sophia. They don't just show Sophia's dead body. They show her with her brains blown out and like splattered on the ground. And I know for Daryl, that just had to be devastating for somebody who took, a real purpose and a real meaning in searching for Sophia and trying to get her back to the group alive. And just to see her that way, I mean, and of course, Sophia's mother, Carol, is also devastated. She didn't even want to attend the memorial service. She, actually referred to her own daughter as, she said, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't remember specifically what she said, but she said, she's not even my daughter anymore. She ceased to be my daughter a long time ago, and she's now just something. And so you can, I mean, it's really nasty. But now I want to focus on, a couple of scenes or a couple of events that I want to analyze to get at sort of, the deeper complexities of this episode. The heart of this episode is basically that, their delusions have been broken down. There's been a breakdown in their wishful thinking. There's been a breakdown in their hope. And that's the most important thing. They could, entertain this sort of wishful thinking, and, at least Herschel could have, he could, continue to live this, to believe this sort of delusional fantasy that maybe his wife was still alive, that maybe his son or his daughter was still alive, that, there would be a miracle and God would somehow, fix everything. That's sort of been shattered, but from a deeper aspect, their hope has been shattered. I mean, it's just been absolutely shattered because the group, they really believed. I mean, there were all sorts of clues, like, I think there was the teddy bear, and at one point Daryl had found out, that maybe she was holed up inside of a house, and there were, little clues that led you to believe that, Sophia could really be alive. And now that it's been revealed that she's dead, the hope that was sort of sustaining the group and keeping them, bound together and keeping them to some extent sane has just completely broken down. And this is really revealed in the conversation between Herschel and Rick. So Herschel, like I said, he practically goes off the deep end. He just up and disappears. And, it's revealed that, he used to be an alcoholic, and that there was a particular bar that he used to like to go to. And so Shane and Glenn go to, that bar to sort of find Herschel and, bring him back, because Betsy, I believe it's either Betsy or Betty, his daughter has, fallen sick. And I'm not going to spoil it, but well, basically, she's in some sort of catatonic state. And, I won't say any more about that. But, if you watch the episode, I'll allow you to make your own inferences. But she's basically in shock, and she's in this catatonic state. So they have to, go find Herschel to bring him back so he can, because he's a doctor and, he can care for his child. And he tells Rick, basically, when they're in this bar, he tells him, he made a conscious decision that he chose to believe that his wife and his, daughter or his son was still alive, that he made a conscious decision to believe that, there would be a miracle, and that he says, he refers to Rick and his group as the plague, because ever since they've gotten there, they have just broken down, this sort of fantasy land illusion that he's sort of built for himself, that's allowed him to continue to keep all of these walkers inside the barn. And, Rick's response is very interesting, because Rick tells, Herschel, he tells him, we have to make up he basically says this, we have to make up our own purpose and our own meaning in order to keep, hope alive for ourselves, even if we don't really believe it. That our job as the leaders of our respective groups is to give these people a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose and a sense of hope, even if we ourselves don't believe it, because those types of things are absolutely necessary to group morale, to group cohesion, and that without them, everybody would basically, go insane, is what he's implying. And, I think that's obviously true. And so, it's just a fundamental fact about, about humans, that there needs to be some hope for them. But what's really important about the way that Rick's character is developing is that now he believes that there is no hope, which is, very, very interesting. And the rest of the episode basically proves why, no one should now believe that there's any hope. But I won't spoil it. But I just, like I said before, it's getting really dark and it's getting really ugly for everybody there. But like I said, this is very interesting development for Rick's character, because we always saw him as the one who was, so full of hope and so full of optimism, and, the one who tried to be the moral authority of the group, and the one who wanted to be, the sort of, vibrant leader, the one who wanted to lead, everybody down the correct moral path. And, and of course, this is also linked to his hero complex, the fact that he needs to be the savior, and the fact that he needs to be responsible for everyone else in the group. But now we see how he's just been absolutely brought down to earth. Like, if anybody believed that, Rick was just some delusional idiot, there's no way you can believe that after this episode, because he completely proves that, that's just not his character. His character is actually someone who was using his position as the moral authority of the group to sort of, rally the group and find some deeper meaning and purpose to their struggle in survival, so that, the group could sort of stay together, and so that there would be some possibility that perhaps they could, continue to live some semblance of a quality life. But now he's just been brought, completely down to earth. And I think the sort of deeper complexity of this episode indicates a sort of, larger breakdown in everyone's humanity. And it seems like, now everyone is being tainted. And if you, I suppose in some sort of symbolic way, perhaps the farm, might have represented in, in Christian terms, maybe, sort of safe haven, or perhaps even a Garden of Eden, somewhere that wasn't, tainted by all of the corruption of the world. But like, Herschel told Rick, ever since they've got there, they've been like the plague. They've sort of, introduced the corruption of the outside world and the sort of apocalypse that is the outside world into the safe haven, well, something that used to be the safe haven of the farm. And, like I said, this indicates a sort of, major breakdown in everyone's humanity inside that group. And I say that for this reason. Humans are a very, very interesting mixture of both reasoning and rationality, but also psychology. Human beings, we use our minds, trick us into believing all sorts of things that aren't real. And that usually comes up in, as a defense mechanism, as a sort of, coping mechanism. And, our minds and our psychology does that to us in order to, protect us from trauma, but also because as human beings, as, as the only, as far as we know, as the only self-conscious animals, we are the only living entities that we know of that absolutely require some sense of purpose and meaning for our lives. Because, without that, this pretty much, it's very difficult to conceive of a human being who does not have a purpose, who does not have a meaning, and who does not have hope. Our humanity, what it means to be a human for us is, tied to our consciousness, like I said, our reasoning, our rationality, but it's also bound up with our psychological state. Like, if you don't have meaning, if you don't have purpose, then you might as well be dead. Like, there's no point to life. There's no point to living a life that doesn't have meaning, that doesn't have purpose, where, the only thing that you can look forward to day after day after day is, looking over your back for zombies, struggling for your own survival, not being sure if there'll be food or water, or if the walkers will come and get you. That is just no sort of, quality life that you can have. And I think that it's interesting that, the show has decided to get, even pick up its darkness from, the previous season, because if you remember, the people at the CDC, there were some people who just decided, this life is just totally not worth living, and I'd rather opt for being dead. And they, Dr. Jenner and also the black woman who was in season 1 opted for suicide. And so I think that, the writers sort of, their end game here is to make the series darker and darker and darker, to force us as viewers to grapple with the complexities of what it means to be a human and what it means to be a life. And if we were in this sort of similar situation, would we also want to stay alive? Or would we just, say, basically, fuck it. Let's end it right here. Let's end it right now. And the darker this series gets, the more it forces us to grapple with these sort of complex questions. And I think, it's just very good writing. It's absolutely excellent writing. But, another aspect, another way to, get at this situation is to, see the sort of, the release of the walkers from that barn, and Sophia in particular, her release from that barn as a sort of a sort of symbol and a sort of, omen. And a sort of, foreshadowing that the series is going to get, a lot darker than it is now. But two, what came out of that barn was the truth. That's what came out of that barn. What came out of that barn was an absolutely nightmarish truth. And the writing, like I said before, is absolutely excellent because they attack a very important part of our humanity. And that's the bond, that's the relationship between a mother and their child. And for them to, consciously destroy that bond, that one link to our humanity that was providing the group with a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning and a sense of hope. I mean, first of all, you have to tip your hats to these guys that they would actually take it that far. But second, like, it's just devastating. I mean, it's just devastating for you as a viewer. And I sort of, predicted this in a couple of reviews ago, that if this actually happened, that it would just be absolutely devastating. And you can just see the sort of, psychological effects that it's having on people. But now I want to, talk a little bit more about, Rick and, sort of, his development as a character. There was a scene in this episode where Shane basically calls Rick delusional. I mean, he doesn't basically say that. He actually does say that, Rick, you're delusional. And the reason why Shane feels that Rick was delusional was because, as Shane says, he had them looking for a girl that, everybody knew was dead. And, again, this sort of brings up that constant motif of the sort of, the hope of, Rick juxtaposed with the sort of, brash, brutal realism that Shane represents in this. And so, again, like, they're, perfect foils of each other. And the sort of, ideological clash that they represent is, is very important to, again, grappling with the deeper complexities and the deeper psychological and emotional complexities of this show. And, so I have to ask, so when, Shane says that to Rick, I sort of asked myself, is Rick really delusional? And, I sort of implied this earlier in this review, but I'll just come out and say this now. I don't think that Rick was ever delusional. Well, let me scratch that a little bit. Do I think he was ever delusional? No, I don't think he was ever delusional. Actually, no, I don't think that he was ever delusional. Now, I do think that Herschel was delusional. I mean, he was definitely delusional. The fact that he thought these walkers were actually human, even now, still, absolutely boggles my mind. But I don't think that Rick was ever delusional. And here's why. I've already, in this episode review talked about how humans absolutely require a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, and a sense of hope in order to, maintain a psychological state that will allow them to keep, living their lives. And I think that this is what Rick was trying to give the group, that, his insistence that they go back and get Merle, his insistence that they continue to search for Sophia, his insistence that he try and compromise with Herschel, all indicate to me not that he's delusional, but that he was trying to find something that the group could hold on to that will allow them to, preserve group cohesion and to allow them to preserve group morale and to find a way to continue to connect them to their lost sense of humanity. And that's what Rick was trying to do. And I think that's what his hero complex is about, that he needs to find a way to save these people, that he needs to find a way to preserve their humanity, and that in the end he feels like he's responsible for this as the leader of the group and as the sort of moral authority of the group. And I mean, I just wonder how this would have played out if they had actually found out that Sophia was alive and they, went on to find her. And I think this is what Rick was gambling on. I think he understood. He knew that there was a very, very strong possibility that Sophia was dead. But he took a risk. He took a gamble which said that, but if she's still alive, it would, absolutely work wonders for the sort of, psychological mind state of, all the members in the group. And it was a gamble that, turned out to be very, very costly for Rick, because he lost lost big time, and the group lost big time. And, you know, now, you know, like I said before, their humanity has been, you know, extremely compromised by this sort of, you know, traumatic experience that they've all went through. And now let me just talk briefly about, you know, Dale. I know a lot of people have, you know, sort of, you know, dislike my videos because of my views on Dale and my views on Shane, but Jesus Christ, Dale is so silly to me. He's an absolutely silly person to me. And the fact that he believed that he could sort of compromise with Herschel is just beyond me. I mean, this episode, in the conversation between Herschel and Rick, this episode absolutely proves that there was no way that Herschel would have ever compromised with the group. Because like he said, and this was his own words, he basically said, I made a conscious decision to choose to believe that my wife and child were still alive, that there would be some sort of miracle. He wasn't going to compromise that, because compromising with that would absolutely mean compromising the core of his faith, and he was just not willing to do that. And so the notion that Dale, you know, would believe that he could have compromised with Herschel about the walkers in the barn is just absolutely silly to me. And also, Dale is such a judgmental asshole. And I know I've talked about this in the fact that, you know, he basically forced Andrea's hand when she wanted to kill herself. But he is just such a judgmental asshole when it comes to Shane. It's so easy to judge another person when you're not in their shoes. And as Shane said to Dale, you know, he doesn't fight. He didn't, you know, sacrifice, put his life on the line to go and save Carl. And the fact that, you know, he wants to judge Shane, I mean, what would you have done if you were in that situation? And I'm speaking now, you know, not just for myself, but I'm asking everybody who watches this review, what would you have done if you were in Shane's position? I mean, I can guarantee that 95% of us would not have allowed ourselves to be eaten by fucking zombies. I mean, how could Dale expect somebody to do that? You're in a situation where zombies are closing in on you, and you know that you have the supplies that are necessary to save a child's life. Are you going to sit up there and be eaten? First of all, I think, you know, Shane did the right thing, because in the end it allowed him to save Carl's life. But second of all, nobody in their right fucking mind would just say, you know what, maybe it's wrong for me to shoot Otis and, you know, sacrifice his life so I can go save this child. So you know what, I'll just allow both of us to be eaten by zombies. No, nobody's going to fucking allow themselves to get eaten by zombies. I mean, if it comes down to if I'm in a zombie apocalypse and it's down between me and you, then it's got to be you. I'm sorry, but you got to go, because I am not going to allow myself to get eaten by freaking zombies. Just not going to let that happen. So yeah. The writing in this series continues to be excellent. It continues to force us to grapple with the deeper psychological and emotional issues that are at the core of, you know, how we think about our own humanity. But also, there are like at least 3 or 4 major things that happened in this episode that I sort of didn't, you know, go over because I didn't want to spoil you guys. But man, this shit is, you know, it's I'll just say this, it's ramping up big time. If you thought, you know, the Sophia subplot was something, it's ramping up big time in this episode. So yeah. This was your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Peace and have a blessed day.